What happens if Ukraine loses US military support? Imagine waking up tomorrow and hearing that the United States has stopped sending military support to Ukraine. No more missiles, no more ammunition, no more air defense systems, and no more billions in aid. Just silence. For more than 2 years, American support has been one of the biggest reasons Ukraine has been able to hold the line against one of the most powerful armies on Earth. But now the question is growing louder across the world. What happens if the United States pulls back? Would Ukraine collapse overnight? Would Russia win instantly? Or would something even bigger unfold? Something that could reshape Europe and the global balance of power forever? To understand the consequences, we first need to understand why US support matters so much. Ukraine is fighting a modern war against a massive military force, with outside help acting as a lifeline. The United States has provided advanced weapons like HIMARS rocket systems, Patriot air defenses, armored vehicles, tanks, intelligence support, training, and billions of dollars in ammunition. But beyond the equipment, America has been the backbone of the entire Western support network. When the US leads, Europe follows. And when America steps away, the entire structure begins to crack. The first impact would be immediate and brutally simple. Ukraine would begin running out of ammunition. Modern warfare consumes supplies at an unimaginable rate. Thousands of artillery shells are fired daily across the front line. Without American shipments, Ukraine's forces would face shortages within weeks. That would mean fewer counterattacks, weaker defensive positions, and more territory slowly slipping away. In war, you don't always lose because you stop fighting. Sometimes you lose because you no longer have the ability to fight back. But ammunition shortages would only be the beginning. One of the most dangerous consequences would come from the skies. Without American air defense systems, Ukraine's ability to protect its cities would shrink dramatically. Russia has launched relentless waves of attacks using cruise missiles, drones, hypersonic weapons, and bombers firing from deep inside Russian territory. Ukraine has survived many of these assaults because Western air defense helped intercept incoming strikes. If that shield weakens, major cities like Kyiv, Kharkiv, and Odessa could face devastating bombardment. Power grids could collapse again. Hospitals would struggle to function. Civilian casualties would rise. The war would become even more brutal, and life in Ukraine would grow harder by the day. At the same time, Russia would see this as its greatest opportunity. Moscow has been waiting for the moment when Western unity breaks. If the United States steps back, Vladimir Putin could declare that the West is tired, that Ukraine has been abandoned, and that time is now on Russia's side. That psychological shift could be just as powerful as any missile. Russia could launch a major new offensive, pushing harder to seize the Donbass completely, cut supply routes, and possibly even threaten Kyiv again. Wars are not only fought with weapons, they are fought with willpower, and removing US support would send a message that Ukraine's allies may be losing the will to continue. Many people ask whether Europe could simply replace America. The truth is, not easily. European nations have provided enormous help, but the United States offers unique advantages: larger stockpiles, faster weapons production, deeper intelligence networks, and advanced long-range systems. Europe's defense industry is growing, but it is not yet built to sustain a war of this scale alone. Replacing American support would take years. Ukraine does not have years, it has months. The political domino effect would also be enormous. If US support disappears, it won't only affect Ukraine. It would shake the entire Western alliance. Countries across Europe would begin asking themselves a terrifying question. If America won't stand firmly behind Ukraine, will it stand behind us? That fear would hit nations like Poland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Finland, and Sweden, countries that live in Russia's shadow. Once allies begin doubting America's commitment, NATO's strength weakens, not necessarily in weapons but in confidence. And that is exactly what Russia wants. For Ukraine itself, the choices would become darker. Without US support, Ukraine would face impossible decisions. It could continue fighting with fewer resources, slowly losing more territory. It could enter peace negotiations, but from a position of weakness. Or it could mobilize even more of its population into a grinding war of survival. None of these options are good. Peace talks without leverage often lead to one outcome: Ukraine being forced to accept Russian demands. That could mean losing occupied land permanently, abandoning hopes of joining NATO, or becoming a neutral buffer state under constant pressure. In other words, it could mean a partial surrender, and the human cost would explode. Beyond maps and politics, the real tragedy is what happens to people. If Ukraine collapses under pressure, millions could face occupation, displacement, and violence. We have already seen towns reduced to rubble and civilians forced to flee. Imagine that multiplied across the country. It would become one of the largest humanitarian disasters in Europe since World War II, sending shockwaves far beyond Ukraine's borders. But the consequences would not stop in Europe. The entire world is watching this war closely. If Ukraine loses US military support, every authoritarian power will take note. China would watch, Iran would watch, North Korea would watch, and they would all learn a dangerous lesson: that American commitment may not be permanent. That could embolden China toward Taiwan. It could encourage more aggression around the globe. Ukraine is not only a battlefield, it is a signal, a test of whether democracies truly defend one another when it matters most. Now, it is important to be clear: Ukraine would not collapse overnight. The Ukrainian army is battle-hardened, experienced, and deeply motivated. Domestic weapons production is growing, and European support would still exist. But without America, the war becomes dramatically harder. Ukraine would be pushed into survival mode rather than victory mode. And over time, survival becomes exhaustion. Exhaustion becomes defeat. So we have to ask the bigger question: who benefits if Ukraine loses support? Russia benefits, because victory in Ukraine would prove that brute force still works in the modern world. It would show that borders can be changed by invasion, and it would give Putin something even more powerful than territory: a message that Western unity can be broken, alliances can fracture, and democracy can be pushed back. In the end, this is not just about Ukraine. This is about the future of global security. Because if Ukraine loses US military support, the war does not simply end. It evolves into a wider crisis: a stronger Russia, a weaker NATO, a more dangerous world, and the next conflict may not stay in Eastern Europe. So the real question isn't only what happens if Ukraine loses US support. The real question is what happens to the world if Russia wins. History shows us something chilling. When aggression is rewarded, it doesn't stop, it spreads. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to like the video, subscribe for more deep global explainers, and comment below. Do you think the United States will continue supporting Ukraine, or is the world entering a new era of uncertainty? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.